everyone. I'm Joan Raymond, and this is A Heart for Writing, where we talk, we give you advice, encouragement, um, tips, and resources for writers of all genres at any part of their writing journey. Today, I have a guest that is a very good friend of mine. She is a spicy romance and romantic suspense novelist, a blogger, a YouTuber, and a speaker. Her name is Donnee Patrese. Welcome, Donnee.
Hi.
I've known Donnee for at least 8 years. She's one of the two ladies that are in my critique group that see my writing at its rawest, ugliest stages. Um, when I served as president of Writers of Kern, Donnee served with me. She was my right-hand person for 2 years who kept me sane and, encouraged me to just, when times were a little tough. So I have a special place in my heart for Donnee. She's a special person to me. So, Donnee, since we're talking about writing, and you've got a lot of books, you've got trilogies, and we'll get into that. But first, my first question is, when did you first realize that you were passionate about writing?
I would have to go back to when I was really, really young, probably about fifth, sixth grade. I was a big reader. I read everything I could get my hands on: newspapers, magazines, books. My teachers had little libraries in their classrooms that I would just devour, read everything on the shelf. And after a while, I started realizing that this is something that I can do. Like, this is something that I really enjoy. I like reading, but I started to write short stories to see if I could try my hand at it. And I would show it to like my English teachers, and they would be so fascinated. They would let me read it to the class. And it was then that I realized this is something I'm good at. And I've always wanted to be a published author, so I just kept writing and writing. Went from poetry and short stories to I started out with horror stories, which is kind of weird, but I started writing because I used to love Goosebumps, and I wanted to be like R.L. Stein. I was just like, I'm just gonna write everything that I can possibly write. And I think the first story I wrote was called The Haunted House, and everybody loved it. And I think I was in the sixth grade then. And that's when my love of writing started, because I was encouraged by so many adults in my life to keep doing it. And that's basically how I got to where I am today.
And then you went on, you worked as a journalist. So I mean, you were published quite early. So talk about that for a little bit.
Well, it started when I wanted to be a published author, but a lot of people encouraged me to do journalism because they basically thought authors don't make money. I was going to be a broke author, you know. So they were like, "Well, you need to find something that you can do that's writing related and also make you a little bit of money." So I looked it up and found journalism. And since I love reading newspapers, I wanted to go into print. So I was just like, well, I'm definitely gonna do this. And so since I think the young age of, I think I was about 10, I started researching and reading newspapers and seeing how stories were written and things like that. And then I went into journalism in college. And my first internship was with the Indianapolis Recorder, and I wrote with them for about a year, and that helped me, get my feet wet in the industry. And then right after that, I was offered a job at the Post Tribune, which is in Gary and Maryville, Indiana. And I started writing for them. I started out, I had to do different beats. So I did the court system, and my main beat though was the school system. So I had to go to school board meetings and write stories about things that were happening in the city. And this newspaper is stretched. It was a daily. So the first one I worked for, the Indianapolis Recorder, was a weekly, and then the Post Tribune was a daily. So that I just was kind of thrown to the wolves. It was a daily grind, and I had to do like 3 or 4 stories a day.
And you had a deadline for all those stories,
Oh,
right?
yeah, by the time I left, they needed to be done. So when I
Yeah.
came in the morning, they would put these stories on my desk, and they would say, "Go interview the people, call people, do all this stuff." So I basically was on my feet. I had one, story I did was about a strike, um, about, building, a Walgreens that
Mhm.
was not, and the people in the city were upset because they weren't hiring locals. So there was a strike, and I had to go and interview the people who worked at the, who were striking, and I had to also interview the people who were building. And that was, for me, I was at the time, I was about 18, 19 at
Wow.
the time. And so it was just like I was I was so nervous doing that. But um it was fun. But then there were a lot of hard times, especially working for a daily, and I ended up having to stop reporting because it was just so stressful.
Yeah. Sounds like it's to me, having deadlines for that many stories a day would just be rough. Once a week, I've done that. I worked for a newspaper and deadline once a week was enough for me. I wouldn't need it every single day. You also said you won an award with the Indiana Association of Black Journalists. So, but then you decided to become a full-time novelist. So it sounds like you were doing well as a journalist, but it was
Yes,
just the stress of the grind and the every day, every day, every day. And so
yes,
you've written nonfiction, obviously, and now you write fiction.
yes.
Okay. So one question that I like to ask is, do you outline? Are you a pantser, which means you write by the seat of your pants, you discover the story a little bit in between? How do you figure out a novel?
Well, I'm definitely an outliner. I start out with figuring out, okay, and most of the time I always have like one character bugging me, one main character bugging me to tell their story. And I started out outlining. Basically, first I would go into everything about that character, everything that you can know about a person, and I do that with a character, and then I go into outlining basically what things will happen in their lives, um, and then eventually I go in because I write with multiple characters, multiple main characters. So I have to do that for each one. And I just basically sit down and I outline the first, I would say I try to figure out what the first chapter is going to be about. Like, how am I going to start? Because that's, to me, that's the hardest thing, is figuring out how to start the entire novel. And I didn't think I could even write a novel in the beginning.
Mhm.
I was so stuck on poems and short stories that I was just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So, but eventually it became a process of mine to just take it step by step. I start with the first chapter. I used to do skip around. Like, I'll figure out, okay, this is what I want chapter one to be. And for my first novel, that's kind of what I did. I figured out what chapter one was going to be. And then I skipped around. I figured out, okay, this is where the climax is going to be. This is what the resolution is going to be. This is, and now I'm more systematic, where I can go through the entire book chapter by chapter in order. And
So
so
it's
I
a
go,
kind of a linear process instead of like, you're writing chapter 1. I know some people, they start with the end, and it's like, "Oh, I don't even know the end until I get to the end because 'cause I'm totally the opposite." Well, it's obviously worked. You have 7 published books, through your First Draft Publishing, company, and so you've got the Prohibited trilogy, you've got Diary of a Wanted Woman, you've got Burned Deadly Desires, and we're gonna talk about that in a minute. I'm gonna have you show the cover of that one. Um, so your characters ever surprised you? I mean, you have this amazing outline, you know exactly what's gonna happen, and you start writing, and what happens?
my outline always changes.
Okay.
I never have an outline that I write completely through. I would say that halfway through the outline, or maybe sometimes sooner, I'll have a character that just completely either jumps out from nowhere, or I'll have a character where I would say in my very first novel, it was only supposed to be two main characters. It was going to be my main character and her love interest. And then somehow the ex-wife jumped in there. And and I was like, wait a minute, this person has something to say. And I started writing chapters for her. And it to me, it just was like, wow, this character is interesting. I had to go back and figure out everything there is to know about her. And so I think that my characters will surprise me. And I've had characters that just happen to have something to say, and I don't have a I can't deny them,
Yeah,
basically. I have
I
to go ahead and write and talk about them, and that's what happened in my first novel, and it has happened since. I think the last, book I'm working on a couple books right now, and the last one that I just completed, I was surprised by at least 2 characters out of that novel, so, um, it happens, I wouldn't say regularly, but it happens a lot.
it's kind of a cool feeling when it happens though, because all of a sudden it's like you're writing the story, but then as a reader, you're like, "Oh, really?" You have that moment where you're like, "This is really good," you know?
Yes,
Um,
and
I was gonna ask you challenges other than characters like, "Hey, talk about me." Um, can you talk about any challenges you might have with your writing and how you overcome them? Like if you get stuck or.
yes, yeah, I've had writer's block on many occasions. I'm sure a lot of writers have had that, moments where I'm blocked and I can't figure out necessarily, what to do next. And a lot of times for me, it's because either I'm not listening to the characters or I don't know the characters as well as I think I know them. So I'm forcing things on them and trying to force through a chapter or figure out, a plot, or maybe I missed something in the beginning and I'm just completely like, at a loss. And I know with writer's block, and I've done a YouTube video on writer's block, but basically, I one of the things that I do is either I always step away.
Mhm.
That's number one. I step away from the story, give the characters time to breathe, give myself time to breathe, and then a lot of times, and this I know this sounds weird, but sometimes I'll take a nap.
Hey, if it works for you.
Yeah, because I've had a lot of, ideas and things come to me while I'm sleeping. I've had, like, I think I'm working on, a presentation, and I was so blocked with it, and I immediately was like, I'm gonna go ahead and go to sleep." It was late at night, and I was working on it, and I'm like, "I'm just gonna go to sleep." And literally, my brain was like, "No, you can't go to sleep. We now have it. Like, we now have what we wanna do." And I'm like, "What?" I've been up all night, and it's like, and that happens with me with my stories. I'm like, I will step away or I'll take a nap in the middle of the day if I can, if that's possible. And I've noticed that I've come up with a lot of ideas that way, or, typically in the shower,
Mhm.
you come up with a lot of ideas that way. But the challenges that I tend to have is when I feel like when I'm forcing it, when I'm really trying to force this story to go through, like I want to do it. Like if I'm on chapter 3 and I'm like, I have to do chapter 4. Sometimes I'll leave chapter 4, go to chapter 5. And because I write with different characters, chapter 5 might be a different person. So I'm able to step away from that character and go on to another one.
Mhm.
And that's something that I love. I love being able to write with multiple main characters. It's a lot of fun.
Plus, it's like a story braid, so you have different stories going on at the same time, and I think that's what, a lot of people are like, "How do you write an entire, you know, 70, 80, 90,000 word novel?" Well, you've gotta have a lot of characters,
Mhm.
and you've gotta have things going on with each of those different characters. So, it's like if you look at sitcoms, a lot of sitcoms have 6 they have 3 or 6, main characters, and they don't feature the main characters every time, but they all have stories, so you follow their stories, and, my characters like to wake me up at 5:30 in the morning, that's their favorite thing. It's like, "No, you can't sleep anymore, now we're gonna tell you what we wanna do," and it's like, "Okay."
Exactly.
Could have done this you could have waited till 7:30 maybe, but.
Mhm.
I know in one of your books, we're going to talk about character names. In one of your books, you have almost every character starting with M. Malcolm, Maria. I can't even think of the rest of them right now. It's been a while since I've read it. But one reason is that was that a mistake? Was that on purpose? Did you just go for the letter M that day, or?
Well, um, I started with my main character,
Mhm.
and I know you're talking about, Prohibited,
Right.
the first one, and I started with, the main character, and I just, for some reason, love the name Maxine.
Okay.
I I really, really just love that name because I don't know if you've seen the show Living Single. One of
No.
the, it's just a TV show with, 4 prominent Black women, and they live together and they interact with each other. And one of the characters is Maxine, and she is a phenomenal character in the TV show. And I just love that name, and I loved her strength. And so I was like, I really like that, and I want to use Maxine. Well, for some reason, I ended up with Michael and Maria, and then Michael Jr. and and then Mitchell, and I was just like, I have no idea where this is coming from. And what's crazy is that on my husband's family, he's Marcus, and there's a Morris, and there's a Monique, and then there's my daughter Madison. And I I think it was kind of just like subconscious with all these M's around me that I
Yeah.
end up picking names with a lot of M's. So I don't know, but I feel like that once you read the book, that you'll understand. Like it won't be difficult to you won't get them mixed up.
No, it's not confusing at all because they each have their own voice, and I remember mentioning that a while back, and it was funny because some writers, I guess I'll say, swear by the philosophy, do not have any characters that have the same start with the same letter. Even sound, don't have a Sandy and a Mandy or something like
Yeah.
that, and they're like, don't ever do that. And it's like to me, I had a character and my critique group said, "We don't like the name, change it." And so I tried to change the name and I was stalled in the story. I
Mhm.
could not write that character because that was his name. It fit him, it was perfect. And so I don't change the names of the character unless I have done a couple times, but most of the time I keep them. So
Mhm.
what is your critique editing process? You write it, you sit at home, you're all by yourself, you write the amazing chapter, and then what's next?
Once I do the chapter, then and I have a process because I'm a little literally like I have OCD. So I will write I have to do it the same with the same ink pen, the same thing. Once I
And I
finish
want to let me
writing,
pause just for you write everything longhand. So I want to make
yes,
sure we get okay.
yes.
So
I
talk
write
about that.
every I write every chapter longhand. I cannot like I said, I use the same ink pen until that one runs out, and then I have another special one that I use. And I have literally, college rule filler paper and a clipboard, and I write it all out. And sometimes I start with like I'll write little stars and I'll write a paragraph, and then I say, okay, I might use that paragraph, I may not. And then I do that, so I have like disjointed paragraphs, and then I have to put them all together. And then I might add some different, you have to add some connectors and things like that, but that's how I start. And then once I complete the chapter, I print it out, I type it up, and then as I'm typing, of course, I change things, move things around, and then I print it out. And then because I feel like when I look at the computer, I miss things. I'll read it on the computer, but then I'll miss things. So I print it out, and I have the same red pen, and I use it. And this one is an erasable pen, and it can be you can buy new ink for it. So I just use that same pen. I buy new ink for it every time. And I just edit with a red pen like I'm a teacher. Go through and edit everything, find the mistakes if there are any, which there always are. And just go through it that way. And then I go and I correct my mistakes. And then as you know, I send it to my critique group. And
Who
then
find more mistakes, but
of course.
Those infamous echo words. It's a word that we love using that we have 4 times on the page and we don't even
Yes.
know it, so
And I try to catch those, and I always go like, I can catch it in somebody else's piece, but I cannot catch it in my own.
yep,
And I try so hard, but I think I've grown from the first novel till now. So I've gotten better at it. I haven't gotten perfect, but of course, because I don't think I would be perfect, but I've gotten so much better with it. But
yeah.
that's pretty much my process, and it seems like a long, process to go from writing it out by hand and then typing it and then printing it and all that stuff. But it's just the way I work.
And
It's
that's okay. I mean, we all have our process. I had one book I could only write with pen on, notepad and then
mhm,
type it up. And then I've had books that I can only type on the computer. So whatever your process is. And I'm giving Donnie a bad time about the echo words because it's almost like I don't want to say a joke because it's not a joke, but it's kind of a joke with our critique group. We all find these echo words and we're like, hey, look, so it's almost like there's the gold. I found it this time. The rest of us are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I checked that 3 times.
mhm,
Um, and also you are an indie publisher. You have your publishing company, um, First Draft Publishing, and I know
mhm.
your husband helps a lot too. So can you talk about your role, his role, how it
Um,
happens?
sure. My role really is because he's a lot more technical than I am. So my role really is I work on the figuring out how to do the covers and everything. I'm the writer, and that's what he always reminds me. You're the writer, so we can't do this without the product. So I make sure that I get the writing done. I make sure that we get I get the blurb on the back of the book done. I focus on getting the cover. So I help design the cover along with my graphic artist.
So
I
you
think
don't do the covers yourself. Let's
no,
bring up that I'm gonna put you on full screen right now. Can you hold up the cover of the one book?
yes,
Okay, so this is part one of there's 2 books, and the
yes,
second one has not been released, but
not
anyway,
yet.
yeah. I know
Mhm.
it's done, but you're working
Yes,
on it.
yes,
But
uh,
anyway, so can you hold it a little closer? There you go. I mean, this is a unique cover, it's really cool. And
yeah,
so you have a graphic designer that puts that all together for you.
yes. We talk, we communicate, we make sure that we have. I could take the book down
Yeah, okay, yeah.
now, but we have a friend of my husband's who he's known since college, graphic arts, and he's a graphic artist. And what we do is he and I will sit down and we will not, well, we'll sit down at our computer because he's all the way in Indianapolis. And we basically just go over like what my ideal is. I send him the synopsis so that he can have an idea of what the book is about. And we just go over like what I'm looking for.
Mhm.
And he totally understands me because when I send him, the synopsis and I tell him what I'm looking for, it takes us maybe at the most 2 times before the cover is exactly the way I want it. And he's done all of my covers, every single one of them. And I'm just amazed at the work that he's done and how well we sync with each
Mhm.
other, how well we connect. And so really those are kind of my roles. I make sure that I get the book done. And then my husband, and of course we share the marketing side of it. But as far as like my husband, he does all the formatting. And he gets the book, he gets the covers get sent to him, and he does all the work as far as getting it on Amazon
Okay.
and getting it ready to go. He does the print and he does the ebook. And then of course he has me do like the final approval of everything, and I make sure everything looks correct. I do the last minute thing, and then we go ahead and send it to Amazon. So it's a team effort. We work hard together, and I couldn't have done it without him, because he has always believed in my dream. since the first book. He when I finished it, and in between finishing it, this one the first one took me the longest. It took me 5 years to write and
Okay.
to complete. And because in between then I had 2 kids and I adopted a kid and so I was all over the place, and working so
You had life going on, so,
yes,
yeah.
and, so he's always been supportive, and then right before it got published, we moved from Indiana to California, so it was, like, a big deal for us going through all that, and, so we make sure that it's a team effort, and we work really well together, as husband and wife.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes he gets on me for being a diva artist sometimes. He's like, "Stop being a diva." And I'm like, "But I want it this way, and I want it," and
Right.
so but for the most part, we work really well together.
Because sometimes we forget that once we finish the book, it is a product. I mean, it's something that came from our heart and soul, but deep down, I mean, after we're done with it, sadly, it is a marketable
Mhm.
product and we have to let it go. Do you get, proof copies before you hit that publish button?
Yes.
Okay.
I have, I think the first book I got well, every book I do, I get a proof copy, and then I send, copies to I have I have, a friend of mine who edits as well.
Okay.
So, I have my critique group who go through it and help give me advice, and then I send it actually to my friend who edits, and she goes through and reads it for me and makes corrections, and then I go through and make and fix those,
Right.
the things that she found. And then so I make sure she gets a copy to read. And then I make sure my sister-in-law, because she's not an editor or anything like that. She's just a lover of books.
Right. A
And
reader.
yeah, she's just a reader. And so I send her a copy and she sends me back her feedback. And then I'll send it to maybe a couple other people
Mhm.
to see what they think. And I get these copies so that because these are people who are important to me and I trust their opinion. So I want to make sure that the product that I'm putting out is something that it comes from my heart, and it comes from my characters, but it's also something that people are interested in
Right.
and that it makes sense. That's the main thing, that there's not plot holes, there's not things like that. That it actually makes sense, and I'm telling the story the way that I want to tell the story.
What do
So
you
that's
think Oh, sorry. What do you think the biggest mistake writers make? Um, they write a book, they get a cover, they throw it on Amazon. What do you think the biggest mistake writers make?
um I would say two things.
Mhm.
One is not making sure that it's thoroughly edited. I feel like that is absolutely important, and some people will just either edit it just themselves, or they will just give it to anybody to edit. And it's because one of the things I found is if there are a lot of grammatical errors, and that was in my first novel. Like when I did the first one, I just edited myself and with a friend, and I basically was like, oh my god, I found so many errors after I published, and it was just like, how did I do this? I thought I caught everything, and I feel like that's one of the things that that writers do, that you need to make sure that you don't do.
Right.
Like you make sure that you have a full edited book. I think also that they don't spend enough time on the actual cover. Like they see it as just okay, it's just on Amazon. I'm just gonna sell it for this. If it's something that important to you, spend the money. Spend the money on the cover. It's important because I've seen books on there that might have been great, but when you see the cover and it looks kinda, unfortunately, I don't wanna have to say it, but it looks kinda cheap
Mhm.
and they didn't take the time to make it a good cover, um, that can deter a reader from buying that book.
I agree. I agree.
They want something that looks, legitimate.
Mhm.
So it's important to spend the money on that.
Yeah.
And, I know, and I got lucky because the person that, does my covers, I pay him. Even though he's, a friend of the family, I
Mhm.
pay him. He doesn't, you know, it's I pay him for his services. And I pay him what he asked for, what he feel like he's worth, and
Mhm.
what I feel like he's worth. And, and I feel like I take the time every time to make sure that the cover is something that I like, I feel like readers will like, and I feel like it's something as a product that it's something that, it's kind of like food. When you're eating food, you eat with your eyes and you see that if it doesn't look good, you're not going to, no matter how delicious somebody tells you that it is,
Yes.
you're
Yep.
not going to eat it if it doesn't look good. And
I
that's
agree. Yeah.
the thing with books. You're not going to buy it if it doesn't look good.
The first book I did, we did our own cover. I had someone take pictures, my daughter put it together, and I thought it was an amazing cover. Put it up, and then I asked the cover designer, and she's like, "Oh, this is the wrong genre. It's terrible." I mean, she was very kind, and now I have a professional that does all my covers, and I told the people that bought the first ones, "Hey, it's a collector's edition now because
Yeah.
you have the old cover." So I have one more question for you. This has been awesome, Donnee. Thank you so much. And
No
also,
problem.
Donnee is going to be for those people in the Bakersfield, Kern County area. Well, first of all, I should say congratulations because I know you took a year off from Writers of Kern from leadership, but now you are vice president again starting July 1st of this year. So congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
And she's also going to be speaking at Writers of Kern, which is in Bakersfield, California, on Saturday, July 16th. And I'll put a little bit of information of that in the description. So if you're in the area, and oh, I should say her title is The Page Turner Method: How Not to Bore Your Readers and Build Tension. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Um, there'll be links for Donnee to get a hold of her, her Facebook page, her website, and she's asked me to even put in her email address. If anybody has questions for her, she's more than happy to answer questions. So, one last question before we're done here. What advice would you give to brand new writers starting out? Someone says, "Oh my gosh, I need to write this novel." What is your first advice that you would give them?
Well, I would say, well, for me, first and foremost, I would say that, because I hear a lot of people call themselves, I'm an aspiring writer and I want to write a novel. And I feel like if you are a writer in your heart, you're a writer. I don't, I never believe in aspiring writers. Like if you've written anything, like you're a writer, whether you've put it out there or been published or not, you're a writer. Um, but some advice that I would give is you just have to write. Like if you want to, that's just ultimately the big deal. Like you just have to just write, sit down and write. Decide whether you like Joan was talking about, decide whether you are a pantser or outliner. Figure out, what genre you want to work in, research that genre. And sometimes create your own. If that's if that's something that you're interested in, create your own genre, and I would say that you ultimately have to get that on the computer, on paper, because if you don't have that novel, you can't get your voice out there. You want to get your voice out there. Don't be afraid to get your voice out there. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Because me being an introvert, I was terrified with my first novel because I just knew immediately that somebody was going to hate it. I was like, they're going to hate it. And my first review was a 3-star, and I cried. I cried because it was a 3-star. And I was just like, they hate me. And after that, I've got nothing but, praise about it. And I feel like just ultimately you have to write, and ultimately you can't be afraid to put yourself out there. You have to be able to do that. No matter if you're introvert, extrovert, you want to put yourself out there and don't be afraid because you're not going to please everybody, but there's somebody out there that's waiting for you to put your book out.
I love that. I love the fact that because there is a fear. There's a because you're putting your heart and soul on a page, and then you're just letting the whole world look at it.
Mhm.
And not everybody's going to like it. Not
Right.
everybody eats meat. Not everybody eats, whatever.
Mhm.
And so it's okay. Just, but it still hurts when we get those, nasty
Yeah.
reviews. So
Like I said, I cried.
But you kept writing. That's
I
the
kept
thing.
going.
You kept writing, and now book number 7, you've got another one. You're doing great. So anyway, Donnee, thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful. Um, anyway, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
So, if you're interested in Donnie's books or finding out more about her, her links will be in the description. If you're interested in contacting me, because as a writing coach, I help writers overcome that fear of putting something out there. And I do have a 7-day free video series, Overcoming Blank Page Syndrome, and that is also in the description. So thank you so much for being here. I hope to see you next time.